To this point, we've talked a lot about the Spaniards, and we mentioned um, the Portuguese and other European exploits, the Columbian Exchange, and whatnot. Let's talk about other European powers at this time. Well, specifically, the English. Okay, the country we now know as Great Britain doesn't quite exist yet. You have modern day the British Isles, the United Kingdom, but back then they were former countries that hadn't unified yet: Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, and Wales. We now know the United Kingdom slash Great Britain. Back then it was the English that were the ones that had the fervor for expansion and growth. So the Spaniards had claimed large swaths of North America and large swaths of South America as well. The Portuguese had a massive swath of South America, largely what we know today as Brazil. The British sent explorers and people to go claim land on behalf of the English monarchy, and look for new lands. Okay, there was scarce land in England, and there was an opportunity to perhaps find a lot more of it in the Americas. So, of course, the English wanted in on this action, and the monarchy would establish various different charters for English settlers to make their way to the eastern coast of North America, the mid-Atlantic region of what we now know as the United States. Okay? And they set up various different opportunities for these English settlers to make their way across the Atlantic. Now, there's a reason for it. The reason for it stems from several different things that are going on in England in particular at this time. We talked about Europe, the fervor for Christianity and converts and whatnot. Well, the Renaissance era and other aspects of this era, you have questions about Christianity as a whole. Is the Catholic Church, which is the original Christian faith, doing the right thing? They have various different rules and Vatican structure, which is semi-political and can be corrupted, and all kinds of various different things that people talk about. Well, also around this time, you have King Henry VIII, who demands to have a son born. Well, in various different ways, he's married to one woman who dies, then another woman who he demands bear him a son, an heir to his throne. And when she can't, he has her beheaded. Another woman demands the same thing, bear a son, and when she can't, he wants to divorce her. Well, under the Catholic faith, you cannot divorce. So, if you're Henry VIII, how do you get around that? You create your own church. We're going to make it just like the Catholic Church, the Church of England. It's going to be exactly like the Catholic Church. It's going to have the same liturgy. It's going to have the same beliefs, similar traditions, except it's not going to be aligned with the Vatican. But we are going to split away from the Catholic Church, and we're going to do our own thing. And therein lies the beginning of what we now know as Protestantism. See, the Catholic Church is the original Christian faith. Obviously, there are many different denominations of Christianity, and they're largely split among Catholic on one side, Protestant in the other. And there are many different Protestant faiths in and thereof. There's only one Catholic Church. Okay, so the Catholic Church is the largest Christian religion in the world, but there are many, many, many other different Protestant Christian faiths. It started with the Church of England when Henry VIII wanted to get divorced. The Catholic Church said he couldn't, so he created his own. That would create wars within England itself to where, oh boy, you've got to pick one. Are you going to be loyal to the Vatican? Are you going to be Catholic? Or are you going to be Church of England now? Oh boy, now you're going to create inter-Christian strife. There are other European Christians, like, for example, Martin Luther, who was a Catholic priest, who questioned a significant number of claims and practices of the Catholic Church. And he became so disenfranchised at one point that he posted 95 different tenets on his door outside his rectory of things he found wrong with the Catholic faith. Of course, he was excommunicated, but he would basically produce his own faith. We know that now as the Lutheran Church. Okay, you would have Calvinists. John Calvin would create basically a separatist movement that believed that some people were predestined to go to heaven, no matter their belief in Jesus. We know this as the Presbyterian Church today. Okay, so in Europe, under the Calvinists, Presbyterians, you also see the Lutherans who broke away. You have the Church of England who broke away, and then of course you still have the Catholic Church itself. You're starting to see a reformation of various different Christian faiths that break away from the Catholic Church, all in the name of various different understandings, interpretations, and traditions. So, you have people that are broken away. You also have a segment of people who take strict interpretations of the New Testament. And they believe in their own things. These Presbyterians say they're predestined. No. These Lutherans say this, that, or the other. No. The Catholics, they're with the Vatican. No. Church of England, well, I'm not English. Well, no. There are various different things and religions that come to understand various different biblical principles and interpretations in various different ways. And when they are not aligned with one of these faiths, whether it's Catholic or Puritan, or rather Church of England or Calvinist or whatnot, you start to see people being persecuted. People in England start a separatist Christian movement, and they refer to themselves as the Puritans. These are people that have a strict interpretation of biblical text, and they will live their lives accordingly. And if you're Church of England, you're kind of threatened by this. That is not honoring our King. That does not honor God, whose name separated from the Catholic Church. Okay? So you have the idea that you are going to bring perhaps different Christian recognitions to parts of the New World. One that's not Catholic and one that's not one of these new, quote-unquote, traditional new Protestant faiths. The idea now that the monarchy has for any sort of settlements in North America was that they would establish a mercantile system as well. Mercantilism is basically the idea that any colony established under the name of a country exists for the benefit of the home country. So, any colony that's established in North America under the English monarchy is there to benefit England. Colony be damned. Okay? You may have to go without because you exist solely for the king. That's mercantilism. Okay? And under a colonial society, you try and understand that as best as possible because you are allowed perhaps various different rights to own land under a charter agreement. You are perhaps allowed the right to own a political structure. You have various different English settlers who make their way across the Atlantic Ocean, and they settle in the Chesapeake Bay, south of modern-day Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and that region, where Maryland and Virginia come together along the coast. And the reason that territory was established was because if you perhaps are going to grow crops like sugar or maybe perhaps tobacco, You want an area that is easily accessible to the Atlantic Ocean so you can get back to England. You also have freshwater rivers that can provide sustenance and irrigation for crops. And you also have slack backwater that provides you other different opportunities. So you have a ready-made opportunity, a coastal inlet in the Chesapeake Bay where you're sheltered from some of the harshness of the Atlantic, but you have access to the Atlantic. You have access to fresh water. The Chesapeake Bay region was selected for colonization. Okay? Before there were ever any English settlers in North America, though, the English had to do something about kind of setting up a training ground. How are we going to colonize North America if we don't have anybody experienced in colonization? That's actually a good question. And if you look on a map, I have one right here. If you look on a map, you'll see there's the British Isles, there's England right there. Over to the west of England is this island right there. That's Ireland. Ireland, top of the morning to you. Oh, your lucky charms. Okay? That's Ireland. Well, the English had the idea that they would go into Ireland and colonize Ireland. They're going to anglicize various different aspects of Ireland, force these Irish people speaking Gaelish to speak English, and they're going to convert them if they're not Christian. Okay? So, Ireland was brutalized as a colonial staging ground by the English, a training ground, if you will, so that eventually the English could go into North America and have a better idea as far as to what they do. Now, the first English settlements were eventually established. The Roanoke colony was established in the Chesapeake Bay in the early 1600s with the idea that they would have a charter and an opportunity for them to grow in various different political structure. Well, the English Navy had the idea that we would be able to go to North America because English naval power is getting pretty big and pretty solid. 100 years or so ago, or several decades before earlier, the English defeated the Spanish Armada. And if you can defeat the Spanish, you're onto something. The English were emboldened by their naval victories. So they felt that they could navigate the Atlantic Ocean and begin settlements on the east coast of North America. And the colony of Roanoke was established along the Chesapeake, but it encountered many different problems. And you can see on slide 20 kind of what it might look like. They encountered the problems, harsh winters. They encountered Native Americans who wondered who these people were. They were actually going onto their land and coasts and what are you doing? That sort of a thing. And so that became a pretty large problem for settlers at Roanoke, and eventually so many of them would die because of illness or threats from Native Americans or otherwise that they would have to rebuild. Okay? Otherwise, you have English settlers that are now in North America. Furthermore, it wasn't just the English and Spanish involved in North America. You have other European powers like the French. Okay? The French established connections in various different parts of North America, largely by going down the St. Louis River and the Hudson Bay over here and establishing territory, claiming all the way around the modern-day Great Lakes into the Hudson Bay region and even parts all the way down the Mississippi River. French. We're going to talk about them in a little bit because they have different ideas that distinguish them from the Spaniards and from the English as well. Okay? There are various different settlements that fail all along the St. Lawrence River and throughout the Great Lakes region, but otherwise, the French have established themselves in North America. Now the Dutch are back. Okay, I mentioned the Dutch as being the promoters of the slave trade. They were the first to do it. The Dutch start making themselves known. Holland is this little bit, the Netherlands, that little bitty country right there in Europe. Okay, but they wield a big stick. They make their way to North America, and north of where English settlers have settled in Roanoke, which is right about there, they establish a territory, a territory in modern day New York. They encounter Native Americans and they offer them the equivalent of $24 to purchase it. They were purchasing Manhattan Island. So you think of New York City, Manhattan as we know it, tall skyscrapers and formerly where the Twin Towers were and all kinds of different things. 2 million people live on this tiny little island. Okay? That was barren, nothing but hills. Purchased for $24 by Dutch traders. Okay? And this island that they purchase, they rename New Amsterdam. Okay? So hold that thought. Okay? Because it doesn't keep the name New Amsterdam for a whole lot longer. But it goes to show the Dutch, the French, the English, and the Spanish, major competitive European powers who have a stake in this game to claim more resources, are now in North America and parts of South America as well, and they're all going to fight for all the spoils. So there's chapter 1.